was hideous. It was just hideous. It was too raw. It needed more, obviously you don't have to attribute structure to one thing, but you could. But that video needed more structure. It was just, but it still delivered points. Um, yeah, obviously, like just working on the structure, you know. And if someone wants to just, the ego is defensive. So if you're watching this video, you could see like this is a working class to see how the ego could quote unquote, quote unquote upgrade, mature, heal, whatever word you could use, right? Because you got to be careful with the words, right? So it's seeing how the ego could heal because the ego is trying to say something. The ego doesn't necessarily get the responses it wants, and the ego, in the future, is always going to receive some type of new criticism, right? And how will it deal with the criticism? It's by seeing it's some type of like reflection, right? So some type of reflection based on what you're, what could reflect back to you. Cause like you could pretty much, you could get into like in life, you could possibly get into a toxic argument. So it's like, what is this toxic argument trying to show me? But if you're with God's clarity, and I don't want to overuse that word because obviously now it's played out, right? If you're using quote unquote God's clarity, it's as if God's clarity is the thing that's protecting you from this, just the general toxicity, right? Because I'm just standardly recognizing the general toxicity and how the ego is participating with that general toxicity and overcoming that general toxicity, and it's still in the field of life's reality, right? The general toxicity. And the ego, if it's healed or not healed, based on how the ego is healed or not healed, it's going to respond based on its level of quote unquote healing. And you don't even have to use that word healing, right? So what I'm trying to say is like, so like if you don't want to watch that last live video or the last short video, it's just kind of updating the understanding, it's updating the comprehension of the general toxicity, right? Not good, not bad, but it could be good, but it could be bad, and if it could be good, if you see the good and the bad, and you see the bad and the good, just casually, that's some type of quote unquote master alchemist, right? You're seeing the good in the bad, right? You're seeing like, too much pressure makes the diamond what the diamond is based on the particular type of pressure it receives, how it receives it, and how there's a particular type of resilience that it has, so it could be the diamond and then go through more pressure and I guess be a different diamond when it comes out, right? And obviously like that's a fatty metaphor too, right? So the point of this video is because obviously the last video was raw as balls, right? It was raw as balls. So since it was raw as balls, and obviously the ego is working on taking constructive criticism. Obviously, like the ego doesn't like saying, the ego could see through your intention, right? The mature intellectual ego could see through your intention. It's like it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So the mature intellectual ego could see how you're saying something, right? Like obviously, like I'm aware that there needs to be some type of structure, right? I'm aware that, we have tasks to do so we could take care of our lives, right? So I'm aware of that. But if the general council of quote unquote earth or whatever, if it's not aware of the general distorted toxicity that's pointing towards quote unquote distortion, then that's going to affect the reality, and to some degree it's going to affect everything, right? So if there's not a counterbalance to that particular type of general distortion toxicity, then the real esoteric collective pleasure is lost, right? So isn't wouldn't it be like respective and appropriate to see that your purpose could be tied with you kind of maintaining some type of collective pleasure since you like pleasure so much, right? So isn't that respective to kind of work out your purpose? Like, aren't you trying to like protect something basically, right? Like, aren't but like for real doing it though, right? So what? So you could tie that, to the purpose, right? On some real esoteric shit, right? So the basic point of the last video was I understand that it's raw. I understand that there's still some quality points have been reiterated, and it was just more of it was just more of like it was just more of like, that's where I'm at video type of shit, and you filter it as you will. But if I wanted to drive home that last raw video is seeing how there's a spiritual intelligence beyond human intelligence, most respectively, is actually doing something about collective general toxicity and distortion that could take different forms. So now I'm concluding that last video because obviously that last video it might need some like touching up, right? So it's like the ego is trying to fucking balance itself through the adaptation of the future, right, right, right. And we casually need some type of love and affection, no judgment there. And something is could be thwarting that love and affection, that we could be participating in the general toxicity and the universal karma does what it does. And the other point that I was saying is yeah, so I'll do more like I'll do more like reflecting to see the other point that I wanted to make. But it's not necessarily just like focusing on like the universal karma dishing it out us back, like what's going on with us. It's seeing like it's seeing yeah, so I pretty much like so I would have to like review the last video, right, to see like there was another point that's there. So I'm not, so it's also important not to like jump the gun too, right? So that there's a point right there. So if I were to conclude the last video, and in some future this will be private, so like obviously people could like they could do whatever they want with like seeing this data, saving this data, storing this data, and then new waves of the future they won't necessarily get it like this because it's just this is just the time, this is just the celebration and the honoring to be alive with original predecessors, right? So I guess it's just like I'm just like if we don't recognize the general distortion toxicity, and obviously then it's not necessarily going to get fixed, right? And if you have like a habituated mind that kind of like thrives with it and you're just kind of used to it, um that's that's if you're just like used to that stuff, then there's still a part of you that hit like deep down there's still some small degree that by a different like default energetic that wants to transform it somehow, and there could be a hidden version of you that could recognize a secret like equilibrium, right, or whatever. Because I get it, like people were like like look at all these like like the reality is just like 3D reality. It's just like it's really like like from what we're seeing from evidence and other pieces of media and content, like it's like something has been intense with the 3D reality experiment of life. Like look at all this, like just look at all the brutal like media and content, right? That like so it's like we're coming out of that, and the people who are like engrossed in that, habituated in that, they're not necessarily recognizing themselves, a certain part of themselves, quote unquote inner child. You don't have to call it that. It could want a some type of a different positive change, regardless of it's engaged in like all of this crazy like artificial origin fucking like et cetera, right? Like like, oh, let's fucking, like, let's brutalize that shit. Let's fucking, like, oh, like, type of like, quote unquote, torture and fear, fucking modeling or whatever. We're habituated with that. And a certain theme of energetic is feeling that habituation, a certain general toxicity within the universal 3D karma is habituating that. There's one more point I want to squeeze out. There's one more point I want to squeeze out. I have to watch the last video. It's like I said something, then I said universal karma, and right before I said universal karma, there was something else I wanted to say of just like, we're just getting a reflection, right? We're getting esoterically we're getting what we paid for, right? And what does that mean? We're getting what we paid for. Your attention over time is putting some type of effort and action within that attention to be interrelated to some type of energetic agency that produces some type of like synergy, and that synergy has a barter and exchange system with other agencies, and that particular agency it's in its own red tape, and it just has its own particular level of magnitude, right? Okay, that was great. So yeah, so it doesn't hurt to recognize general toxicity, and I'm not hating on anybody's, like, I'm not judging your fetishes, like your ego safe here, kind of. And when I say your ego safe here, kind of, it's like the intention of like some type of like clarity light. It wants adaptive solutions. So I'm gonna end it right there.